Sitting in his poorly lit flat, Ethan Carter gazed at the stack of unpaid bills on the table. The weight of failure was pressing harder and heavier against his chest every day as his goal of starting a business came crashing down. The doorbell rang as he was going to write an email to his investors acknowledging his failure. A letter. Yellowed edges, a faded postmark. His father's name on the return address. His father had been gone for 7 years. With trembling hands, Ethan tore it open. Son, if you're reading this, it means life has tested you. Go where it all began, and you'll find your true worth. A chill ran down his spine. Go where it all began. His home as a child, the little town where he had spent the summers in the old workshop with his father. Ghostly recollections of plans, sawdust, and whispered dreams emerged. He had abandoned that world in search of a brighter future, but now he found himself lost. Could he find the solution he was looking for in this letter? Ethan packed his luggage as he had nothing left to lose. He was returning to the starting point. He had no idea. The final words of his father would alter everything. A box that has been buried. A key. One word. Unlock your destiny. Ethan's breath hitched as he brushed the dirt off the wooden box, his father's initials etched on the lid. He had followed the letter's cryptic clue to his childhood home, now a hollow shell of memories. The backyard felt untouched, yet something deep inside had led him straight here, to the very spot beneath the old oak tree. With shaking hands, he lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in dust and time, lay a brass key and a folded note. Unlock your destiny. Ethan's pulse quickened. Unlock what? He turned the key over in his fingers. It was old, smooth at the edges, carrying the weight of a forgotten past. But where was the lock? His father had led him this far. The answer was out there, and Ethan was ready to find it. A key. A locker. A truth waiting in the dark. As Ethan inserted the brass key into the old bank locker, his hands shook. He took a deep breath and yanked the door open as the lock clicked. A tiny metal box sat on the shelf within. He opened the lid. Inside were a will, a second letter, and a document pertaining to company ownership. His pulse thumping in his ears, he looked over the papers. Carter Innovations. The original records bore his father's name, but his uncle's signature also appeared, assuming the role of sole proprietor following his father's passing. Ethan gasped for air. He ought to have owned this business. I built this for you, son. You are at last prepared if you are reading this. Don't allow someone to take what belongs to you. His father had believed in him, had always believed in him, but his uncle had erased that truth, letting Ethan struggle, convinced he was never meant for success. Rage and betrayal burned inside him. How had he lived a lie for so long? He clenched his fists, determination replacing doubt. He wasn't the failure they wanted him to be. His father's legacy had been stolen, and now Ethan was going to take it back. You were never meant to succeed, Ethan. Ethan was surprised by the depth of the words. Sitting opposite him in his opulent office, utterly unconcerned, his uncle Richard Carter swirled a tumbler of whiskey. Richard grinned and said, So you found the papers at last. You took too long. Ethan balled his fists. You robbed me of everything. From my dad. Unfazed, Richard leaned back. No, I took the required action. Dreamer, you were always weak. The business would have been destroyed by you. Ethan felt his blood boil. This man was the mastermind behind years of uncertainty, failure, and feelings of inadequacy. Ethan clenched his teeth and said, You prospered while I struggled. You gave me the impression that I was unworthy. Richard scoffed. Because you weren't. If you were, you wouldn't have given up so easily. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. The world belongs to those who take, not to those who wait. Ethan exhaled, his rage teetering on the edge of explosion. He wanted to fight, to make Richard suffer. But then he realized something. This was not an act of retaliation. He was the one fighting the real battle, not Richard. He had allowed uncertainty to define him for years, holding to the delusion that he was undeserving. Ethan had to think that he had the potential that his father did. His lips formed a slow, knowing smile. "Uncle, you're not correct." He straightened his jacket and stood up. "Treaters do not own the earth. It is the property of those who earn it." Richard chuckled. "Furthermore, what will you do? Bring me to court?" Ethan fixed his steadfast stare on his uncle. "Yes." This was the first time Richard's grin wavered. Ethan was not engaging in his uncle's scheming. It was his own game, and he would prevail this time. Everything was gone for Ethan. He was prepared to rebuild now. Sitting in the empty office space he had just leased, he placed his father's old blueprint on the desk. The very foundation of Carter Innovations wasn't just business. It was a vision his uncle had stolen, but one Ethan would now reclaim. The courtroom battle had taken months, but the moment the judge ruled in his favor, Ethan knew. This was just the beginning. Richard had drained the company of resources, leaving behind a hollow shell. No investors, no employees, just a name and a legacy. However, Ethan had lost his fear. He put on his work boots and went to work. Instead of avoiding his past mistakes, he learned from them by studying contemporary tactics. He selected a group of people that shared his goal, not simply for the money. He developed ties with investors, clients, and those who had previously abandoned him rather than taking shortcuts. He worked late every night. He had to overcome fresh challenges every morning. But he trusted himself for the first time. Months went by. Then the discovery was made. A new product introduction that is sustainable, ethical, and inventive. Investors paid attention. Customers began phoning. Carter Innovations was not only back, but more powerful than before. His ascension was heralded in the news. Ethan Carter reclaims his father's legacy. Carter Innovations, a comeback story like no other. But the real victory wasn't in the profits, the press, or even defeating his uncle. It was in the man he had become. For years he believed he wasn't meant for success, that he was a failure, a lost cause. But now he was aware of the reality. His father had recognized his ability from the beginning, and now he did too. His gains did not constitute success. It was in his transformation. Standing in his office with a view of the metropolitan skyline was Ethan Carter. At last, the goal he had battled for, the empire he had built, was a reality. Stronger than ever, Carter Innovations was booming. Investors have faith in him. His staff held him in high regard. He was victorious. But there was still a sense of incompleteness. He discovered an antique wooden drawer hidden in a nook of the company's archives one evening while perusing them. There was something familiar about it. He dusted it off and opened it to find an envelope bearing his name hidden beneath years of lost paperwork. His heart pounded. The handwriting was unmistakable. His father's. With trembling fingers, he unfolded the letter. "My son, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way. I never wanted to hand you success. I wanted you to earn it. Because true wealth isn't in what you inherit, but in the courage to create your own path." Ethan's breath hitched. He had thought the battle was a punishment all these years. It had been a harsh fate. His father, however, was aware. All along, he had been directing him. "You'll be knocked down by life, son. However, the true test is not how hard you fall, but rather how many times you get back up." A hesitant smile came to his lips as tears clouded his eyesight. He understood now. Money had never been a factor in success. It has to do with perseverance, about refusing to let the world break him, no matter how many times. Carefully folding the letter, Ethan put it in his pocket. Carter Innovations wasn't the only thing his father left behind. He had it.